President Trump trying to distance himself from Jeffrey Epstein as questions around the Epstein files have followed Trump on his trip to Scotland. Let's go to CNN's Caitlin Collins. Caitlin?
Yeah, Jake, obviously these are still questions that the president has been facing as he's negotiating trade deals, saying he'd rather be talking about that, but still leaving open the possibility of a pardon for Ghislaine Maxwell, as he did with reporters today. And also, Jake, offering something that we have not heard from the president before, which is kind of offering an explanation, a new explanation for why he had the fallout with Jeffrey Epstein, who, of course, as we know, decades ago was a member at the Mar-a-Lago Club. We knew his membership had been terminated. And the president today, as he was fielding questions from reporters while sitting next to the British Prime Minister, had this to say about his falling out with Jeffrey Epstein.
For years, I wouldn't talk to Jeffrey Epstein. I wouldn't talk because he did something that was inappropriate. He hired help. And I said, don't ever do that again. He stole people that work for me. I said, don't ever do that again. He did it again. And I threw him out of the place, persona non grata. And by the way, I never went to the island. And Bill Clinton went there supposedly 28 times. I never had the privilege of going to his island. And I did turn it down, but a lot of people in Palm Beach were invited to his island.
There, Jake, the president listing off other people he claims that went to Jeffrey Epstein's island. But when it comes to that, Jake, it was new that he was saying that is why they had a falling out, because Jeffrey Epstein was trying to hire his staff away. We had not heard that previously. Just had been reported that they had a falling out, something the president himself has alluded to. But, Jake, also something the president said today was saying that he does have the right to pardon Ghislaine Maxwell, which, of course, we know he does, but leaving open that possibility, though he did tell reporters no one has approached him about a pardon for her. He said it would be inappropriate to talk about it at this time. But obviously, Jake, it comes as the Deputy Attorney General, Trump's former personal attorney, just met with Ghislaine Maxwell for about 9 to 10 hours last week. It's not clear what came as a result of that. They said maybe they would release more information at the appropriate time, but we haven't learned more. But we do know that Maxwell is obviously seeking a pardon, Jake. I mean, you read any of the statements from her attorney, and it's making quite clear that is what they believe is on the table, or at least maybe a reduction in her sentence as well. And of course, this comes as right now the Trump-led Justice Department is fighting her appeal for her conviction to the Supreme Court. We just had a brief today from her attorney where they were making a direct appeal to him, Jake, and saying, quote, we are appealing not only to the Supreme Court, but to the president himself to recognize how profoundly unjust it is to scapegoat Maxwell for Epstein's crimes. So, of course, Jake, she was convicted for her crimes by a jury and is serving that 20-year sentence. It's a question of whether or not the president steps in there.
And just as a factual matter, Caitlin, I'm not sure President Clinton, that it's been confirmed that he's visited Jeffrey Epstein's island once, much less 28 times. Certainly people visited Epstein's island, and certainly Bill Clinton, as well as Donald Trump, used Jeffrey Epstein's plane. But is there any proof of any of what he just said?
No, and I should note also that Bill Clinton, similarly to Donald Trump, has denied any knowledge of Jeffrey Epstein's crime, saying that he did not know about any of that in the decades leading up to it, because there were, of course, questions about this as we were talking about that birthday book where there was a birthday greeting from Donald Trump, which he's suing the Wall Street Journal over for reporting on, and has denied actually authoring it. There are a lot of other names of powerful people, Republicans and Democrats alike, who have appeared in that. All of them have denied, though, knowing about Epstein's crimes.
Well, somebody knew. Caitlin Collins, thanks so much. And please do not miss Caitlin on her show, The Source with Caitlin Collins. That's tonight and every weeknight at 9 Eastern, only on CNN. Let's discuss all of this with Preet Bharara, former U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York from 2009 to 2017. Preet, good to see you. So President Trump again did not rule out pardoning Epstein's accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell, saying he had the power to do so, which of course he does. She sat for 2 interviews with Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche last week. Blanche, of course, Donald Trump's former personal attorney. Is there any sort of information that Ghislaine Maxwell could provide that in any way could possibly justify her getting a pardon?
I can't think of any. Look, she, like every other defendant in the federal and state system, and certainly in the Southern District of New York, always has an opportunity to cooperate and get leniency from the outset. If that person is credible, if that person accepts responsibility for their actions, and if that person has real substantial information to provide substantial assistance to prosecutors to hold other people accountable, generally and preferably up the food chain. All of those opportunities were available to her at the start of her prosecution, at some point in the investigation of her. And serious, professional, credible people at the Southern District of New York didn't find that to be in the offing. So on the one hand, given the crimes for which she's been convicted, which are very, very serious, she conspired with and aided and abetted what I think the administration itself has called the greatest pedophile in American history. So on the one hand, it wouldn't make any sense to give leniency to such a person. On the other hand, not to be overly cynical, it seems that the president wants to have some measure of exoneration, and he's not gotten that from anyone else. And so if she is able to say, hypothetically, that Donald Trump didn't do anything untoward, and all sorts of other people that they'll put on a list, given the absence of a list from Pam Bondi's desk, who were his political rivals, they did. That's a good bargain for him, probably, in his political thinking.
You know Todd Blanche. He used to be a prosecutor in the Southern District of New York. What do you think he's looking for in these Ghislaine Maxwell interviews? And what sort of pressure might he be under from President Trump?
I don't know what he's looking for. I mean, part of the problem with all of this, and I know him and I like him and he's a good lawyer, is there's not been transparency on a whole variety of issues. We don't know exactly why he went there. We don't know what was said when he was there. We don't know, for example, procedurally, and this is important to prosecutors and agents alike, if he brought FBI agents who were third parties, who were neutral and objective and taking notes so that we can trust the reports that come back out of the sessions. Probably under an enormous amount of pressure for the reasons I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, that Donald Trump is looking for an out. He's looking for something that he can wave around, I believe, and call an exoneration. He's done that on multiple occasions before, even when there are documents and conclusions that don't exonerate him. I hope he resists the pressure.
Yeah. Today, Maxwell urged the Supreme Court to take up her appeal and overturn her sex trafficking conviction. She says that she should have been shielded from prosecution by that sweetheart plea deal Epstein made with federal prosecutors in Florida back in 2008. It's an argument that worked for Bill Cosby with, I believe, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, the idea that, like, just because a new prosecutor comes in, that doesn't void the deal made by the old prosecutor. How likely is it that the U.S. Supreme Court might overturn her conviction?
I think it's unlikely. I don't remember the details of the Bill Cosby case. It's been a few years. But as long as you show, as I believe the Southern District of New York subsequent case did, that there was different conduct, there were different victims, there were different schemes being charged, that wasn't covered. All other conduct, I don't believe, on the terms of the agreement in Florida, even things that were not brought to the attention of the prosecutors there, I don't believe all that was covered. You never know with this particular Supreme Court. I've been surprised on a number of occasions about rulings the past 2 or 3 years, but I think it's an uphill battle for her.
You were U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York from 2009 until 2017, as I noted. This is after the sweetheart plea deal with Epstein was made by then U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta during the George W. Bush administration. But the plea deal was unsealed in 2009, and he probably committed crimes in New York. He had a Manhattan townhouse there that he used. Did any accusations or any case against Epstein ever come across your desk?
Not across my desk, no. I think a person who deserves a lot of credit for reviving this is someone in your profession, Jake, a profession that I respect very much, and am partly in myself now. And that's the journalist Julie Brown.
Julie
from
Brown's
Miami,
great, of course, yeah.
Who sometimes people will talk to journalists before they'll talk to prosecutors and investigators. And she exposed how much of a corrupt deal it was in Florida. She talked to other victims and brought forward people. And her reporting gave courage and inspiration to a number of other victims who came forward, and then a case was able to be made. By the way, the other thing we don't have transparency about, relatedly, that I meant to mention earlier, is why on earth Maureen Comey, who is one of the people in this whole long, drawn-out saga, who actually had something to do with affirmatively bringing Jeffrey Epstein to justice, why she was fired, other than the president says he has a right to under Article 2. So there's a lot still to learn.
Yeah. There's also this madness, this accusation like, oh, there might be that people who are Trump haters might have put stuff in the Epstein documents that, to make it look bad for him. This is one of the most bizarre conspiracy theories I've ever heard. The idea they would do this and then just walk away instead
Not
of
act on it.
Yeah, do it in 2016 or do it in 2020 when they're trying to, or 2024 when they're trying to defeat Donald Trump, but then just put it there and hope somebody finds it, as opposed to anyway. Preet Bharara, thanks so much. Really good to have you.